Have surfaced involving criminal gangs exploiting families in a ruthless scheme. Reports suggest that gangs are forcing parents to pay so-called protection fees to ensure the safety of their children during initiation rituals. Traditionally, it's alleged that when parents refuse, these young initiates are subjected to horrific abuse, including starvation and dehydration, sometimes with fatal consequences. Well, to unpack this, let's now welcome Contralesa General Secretary Zolani Mkiva, as well as Thabang Bohoba, extortion and CIT researcher. Good afternoon to you both, gentlemen, and thank you so much for your time. Perhaps before we start our conversation around extortion issues, Mr. Mkiva, let's delve into the importance of initiation schools and the cultural and spiritual significance, especially when it comes to preserving these cultural heritages and identity.
Now, thank you very much. Good afternoon to you as well as the viewers of SABC. Well, the rites of passage from boyhood to manhood is one of the ancient traditions which is very central in our society as Africans. And it is the centrality of this tradition is such that it prepares young men for a role of leadership at a community level, at a family level, and at a societal level. So it is intended to impact the values of Ubuntu and how a young man in particular, should carry himself, how he should act within character, and how he must mainstream and foreground all the positive values of our Africanity. So it is something that has become so central in our spiritual realm, and you can't negate it. It has become like a religion, if I may use that conception. So, and to some, they see it as a pilgrimage. So all young men, when they grow up, it is something that they look up to as a major stepping stone in their lives, because it becomes a game changer in terms of the status that is accorded to them, but also the expectations that are expected of how they should behave, how they should conduct themselves, and how they should contribute positively in their communities as leaders and future leaders, as future fathers, so to say. So it's very, very critical.
Yeah. Absolutely. We've seen, Mr. Bohoba, just how extortion cases have managed to weave themselves throughout various parts of our society and industries. What is the scale and the nature of these extortion syndicates, that are targeting, specifically for this discussion, initiation schools in the country, particularly in provinces like the Eastern Cape as well as the Western Cape? And to some extent, we've also seen these cases in the Northwest Province as an example.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon to you, Mkiva, and the viewers at home. And yeah, indeed, it's just alarming that now Eastern Cape is becoming number 2 in terms of the highest rate of extortions. Previously, we used to understand that Western Cape, Gauteng, and KwaZulu-Natal were the highest in terms of extortion, mainly because of the economic activities in those provinces. But then let us look at the issues of crime displacements, and we'll acknowledge that whenever a certain crime typology seems to be easier to conduct, even the emerging criminals will conduct such crimes. In Eastern Cape, we've seen that after extortion has been kept in other mainstream sectors of the economy, now it is emerging more in terms of the initiation schools. But you'll understand what makes it easy to occur in initiation school is because culturally and in terms of the constitution, initiation practices are very protected. So you look at the stats, I just went through the stats now. The reports are still way so low versus the actual conduct that's happening. And it's not a new phenomenon in Eastern Cape, Northwest, even in other provinces like Gauteng. But the only challenge is that currently we have initiation season mainly in Eastern Cape and Gauteng. Now, this emerging criminals targets the vulnerable families, particularly the single mother families in Eastern Cape, knowingly that it is also uncultural to go and report or publicly report anything that is related to initiation schools or initiation practices.
And just hearing that, Mr. Mkiva, it perhaps becomes more important that traditional leaders and communities play a bigger role here. What role do you think that especially traditional leadership can play in safeguarding these schools from these external threats, and how can communities, work together to make sure that this is then curbed, especially as you've just been listening to the fact that because this is, cultural related, it is traditional related, there is almost that band that says, do not speak out. But what we are hearing are these horrible stories about how these young initiates are subjected to horrific abuse, starvation, dehydration, and some of them obviously lose their lives.
Well, look, the issue of the extortion comes right at the back foot of what we have had in the recent past with bogus initiation schools. They were using the bogus initiation schools to make money, and they were tapping into a sacred zone because the traditional initiation rites are a sacred practice of our people. So that violation does not begin with extortion. It started with the bogus initiation schools. Already, the people who were doing that were in violation of our own cultural outlook as a people, because these are Africans violating their own African culture. And this is something that is so horrendous and diabolic. So what we are making as a clarion call from the point of view of the Congress of Traditional Leaders is for communities to unite. And traditional leaders are actually very key in the administration of the initiation seasons and the initiation school. So it's not just that they are just going to come as if it's for the first time. No, everything actually begins with them, because they sign off all the papers that allow the boys to go and enroll into the initiation school. So we are saying, as Contralesa, communities must unite, and that's the first feature of safety and security for our communities. And I want to say that culture is dynamic, it is not static. If we're confronted with the challenges of crime, I don't think reporting a crime should be associated with actually violating the sacredness of the practice, because these criminals are now armed with heavy artillery. We cannot afford to leave things to chance with people who want to do what they are doing, actually terrorizing and dehumanizing our communities. So let's stand up as communities and unite, and let's begin a process of reporting, because this is now pure criminality.
Absolutely.
And for the longest period of time, part of our stakeholders in the management of the initiation season it includes South African Police Services, it includes COCTA, it includes the Department of Health. We have had to do that without necessarily interfering with the sacredness. But if we are confronted with issues, for instance, of dehydration, then we need the Department of Health to assist us in that respect. Otherwise, our children will die. If we are confronted with the ill treatment and torture of the children to the extent that they are heavily injured and wounded, we have to take them to a health facility so that they can be attended to. So I'm saying to our people, they must not shy away from reporting this criminality. And we, as the institution of traditional leadership, we will play our role. And we need to join hands with our community members and families. If they are afraid to go to the police station, then they can come and report those matters in traditional authorities or traditional leaders. We will take it up. We can't afford to have this nonsense happening, because it is undermining the integrity and the credibility of an institution of our traditional leadership, which is the custodian of the ritual that we are discussing right now.
Yeah. And Mr. Bohopa, bogus schools notwithstanding, what can be done then to improve security around initiation schools without compromising cultural practices, as we've been hearing now from Mr. Mkiva? I'm also concerned by the fact of, as you've also reported about underreporting, perhaps that also speaks to the systemic gaps within some cultures, but also the gaps in the legal system. Are you also confident that enough is being done, as Mr. Mkiva has been saying, from the traditional leadership point of view?
Oh, thank you, my sister. Perhaps let's benchmark from other provinces whereby Contralesa is in partnership with COPTA and the provincial SAPS in terms of conducting regular inspections at all the legislated initiation school, or including even the bogus ones or the ones that are not registered, and taking the necessary actions. Without divulging so much information into the issues of initiation, the SAPS in Eastern Cape has to form a dedicated task team to focus on initiations whenever it's the initiation season. And of course, we know that there will be minimum requirement that whoever is part of that should have been through the passage, him or herself. And that would assist in terms of partnership with Contralesa, in the sense that whenever there are cases relating to violation of the initiates, or the parents are receiving any threats, they can have an easy way of reporting without relying even on the media or public reporting through that task team. Then they would know that they are protected, because now the challenge is, if you go to report at a common police station, you find that you get normal, I'm sorry, but also men there. By the evening, your child is victimized even further. To say, Umama Wako said this and that at the police station. Sometimes parents lose their kids. And we plead with Contralesa. We are lucky that they are with us today, as well as the provincial SAPS, which I think it is at the pinnacle of this, that they should ensure that the enforcement of the law in the province, regardless of the crime typology. I'm just saying this because if we are going to manage it at the initiation schools, they are going to move and go to Abu Kabeja at the beaches. Now they are at the beaches. So the police must always be upfront in terms of law enforcement, but a dedicated special task team has to be initiated, that they focus on the initiation school until the last day of the initiation, and ensuring that each case is holistically dealt with, to also protect the initiate. Because if we expose the initiate and we deal with the case at the police level, while the initiate is suffering, then that would not do justice to the poor initiate and the dignity that this practice deserves.
Mr. Mkiva, we have come to the end of our conversation, but perhaps let's wrap our interview with you. We are now in the middle of various initiation ceremonies in the country. How have initiation schools evolved to adapt to modern challenges while maintaining their authenticity? I mean, especially given what we are discussing now about the crime levels around these particular traditional ceremonies that we are seeing.
Tradition and modernity are two sides of the same coin. You can't do the other one without the other. So we have to move with times. And one of the things that Mr. Bohopa says is something that is fundamental, which we have been saying, that let us not do this initiation season on ad hoc basis. They should be part and parcel of the annual performance plans. They should be part of the strategic objectives. We have been saying as Contralesa, institutionalize and formalize the initiation season and the initiation schools. And that should include putting a budget aside year to year. In that way, you can do the troubleshooting, you can ensure that you close ranks, you can ensure that you can preempt what needs to happen. And in that way, you are able to curb a lot of challenges that you have. You can't wait until a month or two before the enrollment. Then in that way, you are giving the criminals more time to plan. You are dealing with people here who actually plan ahead of time. Yeah. And for them, because they make a lot of money with their criminal activity, so their plans are always successful. At the end of the time, they make more money through their criminal way of doing things. unless we institutionalize, we formalize, and budget accordingly, we are going to flounder and we are going to continue to experience the same results year on year. So I want to call upon government to work with us on this. This is an African school that prepare leaders of the future. And we must decolonize in our approach by ensuring that it is part and parcel from a government perspective, working with the institution of traditional leadership as a lead partner in the rollout. There's nothing we can do if police are not in the space where we are. Then the criminals are going to overpower us. That's why Mr. Bukhopa says that the police presence needs to be, they should be visible from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. Otherwise, these criminals, they will undermine your culture at the expense of the money that they want to make. So in that way, we must cut fingers and say police must come in, they must be part of the plans. So from that score, we believe that we will see a change in what is happening in the country if that gets done.
Point taken, Mr. Mkiva. Thank you so much to you both. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. Of course, a lot of stakeholders involved to make a success out of these initiation ceremonies and practices. Mr. Mkiva, thank you so much for your time. Mr. Bukhopa, thank you so much for your time. Contralesa General Secretary Zolani Mkiva, as well as Thabang Bukhopa, extortion and CIT researcher.